I never really thought I'd settle down anywhere. Not in the way people do with mortgages and mailboxes and neighbors who know your name and have opinions about your trash cans. For 15 years, I drifted. Alaska, Montana, the Yukon, building cabins, guiding climbers, chasing storms and solitude. But eventually, even the wild stops feeling like a home and starts feeling like a hiding place. So when I saw the listing for a collapsed old hunting cabin near Clear Rock Ridge, I didn't hesitate. It wasn't much. Hell, it wasn't anything. Just a patch of battered land on a lonely peak, with a roof that sagged like an old man's shoulders and walls that had given up on standing straight. But it was mine. Every square inch of it. No neighbors, no oversight, no damn HOA. The locals had all but written it off. I overheard someone in town say, "That place'll rot to its bones before someone moves in." But that was the beauty of it. It wasn't a move-in ready escape. It was a challenge. And I needed a challenge more than I needed comfort. The county clerk raised an eyebrow when I signed the purchase agreement. She asked if I'd ever heard of Pinecrest Summit. I shook my head. "It's 3 miles down the slope. Nice folks," she said, with a tone that told me they probably weren't. "You're technically outside their jurisdiction." She said technically, the way lawyers say allegedly. I didn't think much of it at the time. I had a deed, a plat map, and a gut full of resolve. That was enough. It took me nearly 9 months to bring that cabin back to life. I rebuilt the foundation stone by stone, hauled lumber on my own back, put in a steel roof with my bare hands during a lightning storm that, in hindsight, might have been a little too cinematic for safety. Installed solar panels, dug a composting toilet, tapped into the groundwater. By the time I was done, the place looked like something out of a travel magazine. Rustic, self-sufficient, and just remote enough to keep the noise of the world away. I even built a little wood-fired sauna out back. Not bad for a guy whose last bathroom was a snow trench in Denali. I named it Clear Rock Ridge Refuge and listed it on a few eco-tourism sites. Airbnb, Hip Camp, a couple niche backcountry forums. I posted a few photos. The sunrise hitting the ridge like fire, the solar panels glinting behind hand-hewn logs, the hammock I'd strung between 2 old pines. I didn't expect much, just hoped to recoup some of what I'd sunk into the build. But within 72 hours, my inbox exploded. Hikers, honeymooners, burnout techies from Denver. They all wanted a weekend of silence and stars. By the second week, I was booked out for 3 months. Reviews started piling up. A piece of heaven. Built with love. The kind of place that makes you forget to look at your phone. I felt proud in a way I hadn't in years. I'd built something real. Not just with wood and sweat, but with intent. This wasn't just a cabin. It was proof that you didn't need to join a gated community or follow someone else's rules to create something beautiful. I spent my mornings splitting wood, my afternoons checking on solar batteries, my evenings walking the ridge. Some nights I joined guests by the fire pit, shared stories about mountain storms and bears in the outhouse. Others, I just sat on the porch with a mug of coffee, listening to the wind comb through the trees. The quiet didn't last. It was a Monday, 3rd week into bookings. I was sanding down a pine bench when I heard tires on gravel. No one came up this road without calling first. My guests were off hiking. I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped out into the clearing. A black SUV rolled to a stop at the base of the path. Out stepped 3 people, all wearing matching windbreakers that said, Pinecrest Summit, HOA Development Board, in bold lettering. The woman leading the pack looked like she'd walked out of a city council meeting and gotten lost. 60-something, stiff posture, sunglasses with lenses too large for her face. Her mouth was a tight line, like she was already tasting something sour. She approached like she owned the place. "Good afternoon," she said, in that tone that makes it very clear it's not a good afternoon. "I'm Karen Stanley. I'm the president of the HOA board down at Pinecrest Summit." I nodded. "You're a few miles out of your neighborhood." She gave a tight smile. "We're here to inform you that your property now falls within our extended HOA jurisdiction. We've recently passed a developmental inclusion vote, and new zoning ordinances apply to any active rental or commercial property within a 5-mile radius of Pinecrest boundaries." I let that hang for a moment. Then I said, "That sounds like a you problem." Karen didn't blink. "You're required to register your rental with our association and remit 40% of your revenue for community infrastructure." I stared at her. 40%? It covers road maintenance, trail cleanup, fire mitigation, and visual conformity initiatives. I laughed once, not out of humor, but disbelief. "Lady, I built this place by hand, paid for every nail. This land isn't inside your lines, and I've got the paperwork to prove it." Her smile didn't waver, but something tightened behind her eyes. "We're aware of your supposed exemption, but under revised policy language, we're pursuing proactive annexation." "Proactive annexation," I repeated. "Sounds like a hostile takeover with a fresh coat of paint." She took a step closer. "If you refuse to comply, we'll be forced to file a construction violation with the county. Given the speed of your development, your build permits may be, how should I put it, worth reviewing. We'd hate to see a demolition order on such a quaint little project." I didn't move. "This is private land. I'm not part of your HOA. I don't owe you a goddamn cent. You're trespassing." Karen's lips curled. "You'll regret this stubbornness." And then they turned and left. No flyer, no card, no handshake. Just dust and silence. I watched them go, already knowing this wasn't the end of it. I didn't sleep much that night, not out of fear. I've slept through avalanches and once woke up to a black bear sniffing my boots. But something about that woman, Karen, rattled me in a different way. Not because of what she said, but how she said it, like she already believed the land was hers, and my ownership was just an inconvenience she hadn't bulldozed yet. The next morning, I pulled out the manila folder with my property docs. Deed, plat maps, county zoning certs. I reread everything just to be sure I hadn't missed some tiny clause in footnote font. But it all checked out. I was well outside Pinecrest Summit's boundaries, and the only signatures on these papers were mine and the county recorder's. Not a single HOA stamp in sight. Still, something about proactive annexation clung to my brain like the smell of burnt wiring. I made a few calls, county records, zoning office, even a friend of mine who used to work for the Department of Natural Resources. No one had heard of any legal expansion by Pinecrest Summit, and none of them had issued any changes to my parcel. But then, none of them sounded particularly surprised by the idea either. One clerk muttered, "That HOA's been trying to grab more turf for years," before backpedaling and hanging up. By Thursday, I figured maybe that stunt was all bluff. Just Karen puffing up her HOA authority like a blowfish. I put it out of my mind and focused on the guests coming in that weekend. A couple from Missouri who'd never seen a mountain sunrise. I prepped the fire pit, stocked extra coffee, made sure the solar battery was full. Then, the next Tuesday, I got a visit. I'd just come back from checking the South Ridge Trail when I saw the truck parked outside my cabin. Big, dark green, with stenciled white letters on the side. Mountain Zoning Enforcement. Two men in matching field jackets were walking around the front of the cabin, one holding a clipboard, the other snapping photos with his phone. They had on sunglasses and utility belts, like they were playing government cosplay. "Can I help you?" I called out, keeping my voice level. The one with the clipboard turned. He was in his 40s, heavy-set, with a thick neck and a badge clipped to his belt, though I couldn't make out the agency name. "Afternoon, sir. We're here on a routine inspection. This property has been flagged for possible code violations under recent expansion protocols." "Expansion protocols?" I repeated, not even bothering to hide the sarcasm. "That from Pinecrest Summit?" He gave me a shrug that could have meant anything. "Just need to verify permit compliance, structural integrity, sewage handling, fire access. You got paperwork handy?" "Sure," I said, "right after you show me yours." The second guy stopped photographing and turned toward me. "You refusing a lawful inspection?" "I'm refusing a bullshit inspection from two guys I've never seen before, with no jurisdiction and no ID I can verify." I pointed to the logo. Mountain Zoning Enforcement doesn't exist on the state's directory. "Believe me," I checked. There was a long silence. Then Clipboard Guy smiled, and it wasn't friendly. "We can call this non-compliance and report it up the chain." "Yeah," I said. "You do that. Meanwhile, I'm calling the sheriff." At that, they got twitchy. The second guy muttered something, and they backed off fast. No argument, no form left behind. Just a "have a nice day" through clenched teeth as they climbed back into their truck and rolled out. I stood there watching the dust settle. Then I went inside, pulled up the video feed from my motion-activated trail cameras. They'd caught everything. Faces, license plate, the works. I sent the footage straight to the county sheriff's office, along with a formal complaint. Then I filed a report with the state's zoning department, just in case. And for good measure, I called up Airbnb and HipCamp, told them I'd been harassed by what appeared to be fake inspectors, and uploaded the footage to my listings as proof of security. For a few days, I heard nothing. Then, Sunday night, my listing went dark. Airbnb flagged my cabin as under review due to safety concerns. No explanation, just an auto-generated email. HipCamp did the same 12 hours later. Future bookings froze. Messages from would-be guests stopped cold. I called Airbnb support, got routed through 3 departments, and finally spoke to someone in trust and safety who admitted, off the record, that they'd received a complaint citing unlicensed commercial activity and improper waste disposal, threatening local ecosystems. The complaint included photos, likely the same ones taken by those fake inspectors. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I was starting to recognize the pattern. A pattern with Karen Stanley's smug fingerprints all over it. I sent over all my permits, videos, documentation. Within 48 hours, both platforms restored my listings. But the damage was done. I'd lost 2 weekend bookings and probably scared off others who didn't want to deal with property politics, as one cancellation email phrased it. But now I knew this wasn't random. This wasn't a petty HOA enforcing lawn height or mailbox colors. This was calculated, organized, and it was only just starting. I didn't know how deep the rot went yet, but I'd already seen the termites. By week 5, I stopped waiting for the next move. I knew it would come. The only question was when and how far they'd take it. I kept the GoPros rolling. I installed another trail cam in the trees, aimed at the road bend where every visitor had to slow down before reaching the cabin. I started logging every vehicle, every unusual sound, every envelope that showed up without a return address. I even installed motion lights, not because I thought it'd scare anyone off. Anyone doing this wasn't afraid of being seen, but because it made me feel a little less like prey. Then the warnings stopped being vague. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I got the letter. No postage, just hand-delivered and jammed into my gate latch. Heavy stock, HOA letterhead, and an impressive attempt at bureaucratic intimidation. It said my unauthorized structure was now classified as a potential hazard, and subject to emergency review by the Jefferson County Structural Safety Panel, under the auspices of a citizen-reported complaint. Funny, I'd never heard of that panel. And I used to work with avalanche rescue teams who knew the county structure better than the people who worked in it. But what really caught my eye was the signature. Derek Fallon, Assistant Director of Community Development, Jefferson County. It rang a bell. I'd seen the name before, on the so-called expansion map the HOA reps showed me. He'd been the one listed as an endorser of the boundary revision. Except that map never came through any legal channel. It had no survey stamp, no registrar code. It was a Photoshop job dressed up like policy. I tried calling the county office to get some clarity. Left 2 voicemails. Then I tried emailing Fallon directly. 2 days passed. No response. Meanwhile, I started getting strange calls. Blocked numbers. One woman with a sugar-slick voice asking if the cabin was zoned for mixed recreational use, and could she inquire about a group lease agreement? Another caller asking if the property was still available for commercial purchase under easement terms. The hell does that even mean? I decided to dig deeper. It took some work, but I eventually found something. Hidden in the county's public contract database was a minor, easily overlooked line item. Consulting services, Summit Growth and Planning Initiative, awarded to a private entity called Mountain Growth Services, LLC. I dug further. That firm was registered 6 months ago. And the names on the formation documents? Karen Stanley and Derek Fallon. That's when it clicked. Karen wasn't just playing HOA tyrant. She had her claws sunk into county planning, too. Fallon wasn't just lazy or overworked. He was part of it. This was a slow-motion land grab, dressed in procedural paper and fake inspectors. My cabin was never the problem. It was an obstacle. I felt the heat in my chest build as I stared at the registration printout. Fallon and Karen had cooked up a scheme to quietly annex nearby parcels under the guise of eco-preservation and rural harmonization. But it wasn't about nature. It was about control, and, almost certainly, money. I needed witnesses. I started reaching out to folks I'd met during my trips into town. Off-grid people, retirees, farmers clinging to their land like barnacles on stone. Some answered cautiously. Some didn't answer at all. But 3 responded. The first was Vic, a Vietnam vet living in a crooked A-frame at the base of the ridge. He told me, in a voice like gravel in a tin can, that 2 men from the HOA had come by last fall demanding access to inspect his generator enclosure. When he refused, they came back a week later, and his generator was gone. Vanished like it had grown legs. The second was June, a widow whose property had a view of the lake. HOA sent her a community appearance correction notice and threatened a lien if she didn't remove her late husband's handmade fence. The fence was gone now. She caved after the sheriff's deputy said he couldn't intervene in a civil dispute. The third was Emmett, a cattle rancher whose land sat next to a now-paved easement that accidentally rerouted part of his access road. He told me he'd heard Karen was buying up parcels through shell companies, but he never had proof. "Everyone here just wants to be left the hell alone," he said. "That's why they picked us." That night, I sat at the cabin's fire pit, staring into the flames. The sky above was ink black, stars scattered like someone had dropped salt on velvet. It used to calm me, but not now. Now it felt like even the dark had ears. I started compiling everything: videos, photos, emails, call logs, and a printed copy of the Mountain Growth LLC formation docs. I scanned June's HOA letters, photographed Vic's torn-up property, and got Emmett to write a signed statement about the road tampering. By the time I was done, I had a file thicker than the original deed to my land. I called in a favor from a guest who'd stayed a few weeks back. an attorney from Santa Fe who had a deep hatred for bad faith zoning cases. When I told him what was happening, he drove up that weekend with a laptop, a bottle of whiskey, and a war-ready grin. "You've got racketeering, fraud, abuse of office, and possibly conspiracy to commit land theft," he said, flipping through my folder. "This is more than a lawsuit. This is a firestorm waiting to happen." And suddenly, for the first time in weeks, I felt something new. Control. They came for the cabin just after dawn. I was down by the spring head, checking the inlet pipe for a minor leak I'd noticed the day before, when I heard it. A low mechanical rumble echoing through the trees, like thunder too close to be natural. At first, I thought maybe a guest had gotten lost and wandered in with a pickup. But then I heard metal clanking and the unmistakable growl of diesel engines straining uphill. I dropped my wrench, wiped my hands on my pants, and started back up the path fast. Halfway up, I heard a shout, someone barking orders, then the crunch of tires over stone. By the time I cleared the tree line and saw my clearing, my stomach dropped like it had hit a sinkhole. A yellow bulldozer stood parked at the edge of the turnaround, angled toward the cabin like it was waiting for permission to charge. Beside it was a flatbed truck with 6 orange-vested workers milling around like it was just another day on a job site. One guy was already unspooling caution tape. Another had a clipboard and a smug expression. Standing in the middle of the clearing, arms folded across her chest, like a statue that had achieved sentience and gone fully passive-aggressive, was Karen Stanley. I didn't say anything at first, just walked straight toward her, heart pounding but steps steady. She turned when she heard my boots hit gravel, and her smile bloomed like a death flower. "Good morning, Mr. Bray," she said, all sugar and venom. "I'm afraid we have an order for emergency remediation of this structure." "Bullshit," I said. "Your property has been classified as non-compliant and structurally hazardous," she continued, unfazed. "Under the emergency powers granted to the HOA by County Zoning Partnership Protocol—" "Don't finish that sentence unless you brought a sheriff and a court order," I snapped. "Because unless one of those men is a judge in disguise, this is illegal as hell." One of the workers, a guy in his 50s with a gray beard and tired eyes, glanced over at her. "We were told this was cleared with the county," he said, more uncertain now. Karen didn't even blink. "It's authorized." I pulled out my phone, flipped to video, and started recording. "This is private land," I said loudly enough for every man there to hear. "There is no demolition order filed. There is no emergency order posted. If you so much as scrape one board of this house, you're going to be on the receiving end of a lawsuit that'll outlive us all." I stepped in front of the bulldozer and planted myself there, camera raised. This footage is being backed up to the cloud, every second. Karen's face twitched. That's when I made the call. I hit the sheriff's direct line, because I'd already programmed it in a week ago. Call it a gut feeling. To their credit, they answered on the second ring. "Clear Rock Ridge," I said. "Unauthorized construction crew. Attempted demolition. No paperwork. Send someone now." The dispatcher asked if I felt physically threatened. I said, "Not yet, but I'm blocking a bulldozer with my body, so let's not tempt fate." While I waited, I kept recording. Karen paced. One of the workers, the tired-eyed guy, quietly walked back to the truck and sat in the cab. 2 others pulled out their phones and started arguing in whispers. 20 minutes later, a sheriff's SUV pulled into the clearing, kicking up dust and tension in equal parts. Out stepped Deputy Reyes, a steady guy I'd met once during a community wildfire drill years back. He looked around at the scene, the dozer, the workers, Karen's crossed arms, and then over at me, still recording, still standing firm. "Anyone got a court order?" Reyes asked. Karen stepped forward, all authority. We were informed by county development that this site was under a pending hazard order. Mr. Fallon signed the— Reyes held up a hand. Signed isn't filed. Is the order posted? Was the landowner served? Karen hesitated. There may have been a delay in communication. There's no order, I cut in. Ask dispatch to confirm. I checked the docket myself yesterday. Reyes pulled out his radio. 2 minutes later, he nodded slowly. No record of any order, he said, then turned to the workers. Y'all need to leave this property. Right now. Pack it up. The foreman raised both hands. Hey, I don't want trouble. We were hired for demo work. Didn't know there was a dispute. Karen turned scarlet. You're letting him flaunt an illegal structure. No, Reyes said firmly. I'm stopping you from bulldozing a man's house without the law on your side. The workers started loading up. The bulldozer wheeled back down the hill like a sulking predator denied a meal. Karen stood frozen, her jaw clenched so hard I thought she might bite through her own molars. She walked up to me, close enough that I could smell the mint from her expensive toothpaste. You're not untouchable, Mr. Bray, she said quietly. This isn't over. I didn't smile. I just said, You blinked first. She turned and left, and I stood there until the last truck disappeared down the trail. Then I sat on the porch steps, phone still in hand, heart hammering through my ribs. They'd brought heavy equipment to destroy my home. They'd expected no resistance, no cameras, no law. But I'd caught them in the act. And now, I had a feeling Karen Stanley was going to make one more mistake. A big one. After the bulldozer incident, I knew I had two choices. Wait for the next ambush, or take the fight straight to the root. So I went digging, not with a shovel, but with coffee, legal pads, and a kind of obsessive fury I hadn't felt since my worst climbing season. The kind where every decision meant life or death. Because this wasn't about property lines anymore. This was about people thinking they could rewrite reality with a forged letterhead and a rented excavator. I started at the County Archive Center, a squat brick building in town with faded posters about wildfire safety, and a front desk staffed by a retiree named Doreen, who wore glasses on a chain and smelled like lemon lozenges. I asked her for every map, ordnance, and filing tied to Pinecrest Summit. She raised an eyebrow and said, You got a truck? This ain't gonna fit in your backpack. Over the next 3 days, I scanned, photographed, highlighted, and drank so much gas station coffee, my hands shook. What I found was both unsurprising and infuriating. Maps that had been edited, subtly at first, then aggressively in the past 6 months. One digital plat, submitted to the public archive, showed my parcel shaded in faint blue under Pinecrest zoning expansion area. But the original physical plat, stamped and sealed 5 years ago, showed a solid white border around my land, marked private exclusion, non-participatory. The fake expansion had been slid into the system with no vote, no hearing, and no public notice. Just uploaded. That's when I realized what Karen had meant that first day with, We've recently passed a developmental inclusion vote. She hadn't passed anything. She'd just faked it and dared the county to notice. And the county hadn't noticed, because someone inside had helped her do it. All roads led back to Fallon. I dug into his financial disclosures, which are public record if you know where to look. Most were boring. A mortgage, a couple mutual funds, the usual bureaucrat sludge. But one caught my eye. A consulting income line from a firm called Summit Escapes Holdings, LLC. A quick cross-reference showed that Summit Escapes shared a registered agent with Mountain Growth Services, the firm Karen and Fallon co-founded. I called my lawyer friend, Eli, and rattled this off like a madman. He whistled low and said, "Buddy, this isn't just civil fraud. This is RICO territory." RICO, Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. The kind of thing they use for organized crime. And this was organized crime. HOA edition. But I needed more. A story is only a story until you have proof. So I started talking to people. I drove back to Vic's property, the vet who'd lost his generator. This time, I brought a voice recorder. He sat on his porch with a rifle across his knees and told me exactly how 2 compliance officers showed up, demanded access, and when he refused, his generator mysteriously vanished 3 days later. He never saw them again, but he did find tire tracks leading to a back service trail that connected, you guessed it, to Pinecrest Summit. I visited June again. She brought out a shoebox of old letters from the HOA, some of which bore a county seal. A seal that, Eli later confirmed, was an outdated version that hadn't been used since 2013. It was fake, badly faked, and she had 3 notices bearing it. Emmett, the rancher, handed me photos of the roadwork rerouting that had cut into his pasture. He said a county contractor had promised to return and repave it, but never did. The invoice listed the contractor as MG Growth and Design, which, according to business records, had been created less than a month before the work began. The registered agent? Fallon's cousin. At this point, I stopped keeping notes in a spiral notebook. I built a digital evidence file with backups across 2 cloud services and a flash drive I wore around my neck. Call me paranoid. Paranoia keeps cabins standing. Then came the break. Eli got a tip from a contact in Denver media, a freelance journalist named Rena, who specialized in land disputes and local corruption. She'd heard whispers about Pinecrest for months, but hadn't had anything concrete. Until now. I met her at the Ridge. She was sharp, fast-talking, and carried 2 cameras and a drone in her backpack. I laid out everything I had: maps, recordings, contracts, the photos of the dozer, the video of Karen threatening me. She didn't say much during the first 30 minutes. Then she leaned back and said, "You're sitting on a land bomb. I'm going to blow this wide open." She published the first story within 48 hours. Private cabin owner resists HOA land grab. Corruption in Jefferson County? It exploded. By the end of the week, 4 more articles followed. Local news picked it up. Then regional outlets. Comments flooded in. Other victims started reaching out, some anonymously, some publicly. One woman claimed her family land had been forcibly absorbed into the HOA for fire safety coordination. Another man shared drone footage of unpermitted grading by HOA crews a mile outside their zone. Karen stayed quiet. Fallon denied everything. But then someone, I still don't know who, leaked internal HOA emails to Rena. One of them was pure gold. It was from Karen to Fallon, dated 3 months ago. Clear Rock Ridge is key to Phase 2. Bray doesn't realize what he's sitting on. If we can't buy him out, pressure will do. Worst case, we bury him in enforcement. Pressure, demolition, lies, forgery. It was all in writing. Eli's eyes lit up when I showed him. "This is the linchpin," he said. "We go public, we go federal, we file a class action suit, and we do it loud." The next morning, we filed the first round of legal complaints. Fraud, abuse of power, trespass, attempted unlawful seizure, RICO violations. We were no longer reacting. We were going on offense. When the lawsuit dropped, it echoed like a thunderclap across the valley. The courthouse clerk told Eli it was the most complex civil filing they'd seen that year. 46 pages, 13 exhibits, 5 plaintiffs, and the kind of language that made county officials sweat through their shirts. It was all there. Forged maps, fake inspections, threats, shell companies, and direct abuse of office by Fallon. And for Karen, wire fraud, civil conspiracy, and good old-fashioned attempted land theft. I expected silence, maybe some back-channel threats. But what I got instead was noise, a sudden avalanche of attention. Local news crews hiked halfway up the ridge to film outside my cabin. One Denver outlet even chartered a helicopter to get aerial shots. My face ended up on the evening news, next to a headline that read, HOA overreach or organized scam. County officials under fire. The best part? Karen cracked. Not publicly, not with an apology or a statement, but she blinked hard when the county commissioner ordered a full review of all Pinecrest Summit expansion policies. Fallon was suspended pending investigation within 48 hours of the leak. He tried to get ahead of the storm, held a press conference claiming he was misled by Karen and had no knowledge of forged documents. Unfortunately for him, someone dug up a promotional brochure for Summit Ridge Eco Spa, the proposed luxury resort tied to their shell company, listing Fallon as project advisor. That got around fast. Meanwhile, the HOA board scattered like ants under a kicked rock. 2 members resigned, claiming they were kept in the dark. One tried to wipe their emails before the county IT team got to them. Another fled the state. Karen? She lawyered up and stopped answering questions. But the pressure didn't stop. Vic, June, and Emmett, my co-plaintiffs, gave statements on camera. Rena released a second report titled The HOA That Went Too Far. Hundreds of comments flooded in, stories from people across the country who'd been bullied, threatened, or tricked by their own associations. It became a national conversation. Suddenly, HOA abuse wasn't just my story. It was the story. 2 weeks after we filed, we got a call from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They were opening a preliminary investigation into Fallon and Karen's dealings. Fraudulent land expansion under the guise of community development was now a federal issue. Eli said it best. They were playing zoning games. You turned it into a RICO case. And through it all, the cabin stood. Bookings resumed. Guests left thank-you notes and stories of how they'd followed the case. One guy brought a bottle of whiskey just to toast the porch. I refused to let them bulldoze. I fixed the welcome sign. It now read, Private property, legally excluded. Unwelcomed bureaucrats will be recorded, reported, and ridiculed. The road was quiet again, but this time I knew the silence was earned. 6 months later, I stood on a wooden stage built out of old barn beams, looking out at a field full of people. Landowners, off-gridders, ranchers, and a surprising number of young families in flannel. A banner flapped behind me, white letters on green canvas, Mountain Landowners Fair, celebrating property rights and local resilience. Funny thing was, I hadn't planned to speak. I was just supposed to host a booth, maybe talk to folks about off-grid cabin building or solar installs. But when the organizers asked if I'd say a few words to open the event, it didn't feel like a choice. After everything, staying silent felt too much like losing. I stepped up to the mic, cleared my throat. I never set out to be the poster boy for fighting HOAs, I said, voice steady. All I wanted was a quiet piece of land where I could build something with my own hands. No one told me that wanting peace would bring a war to my door. Some people laughed. Others just nodded. They'd lived it too. I stood up to them not because I'm brave, but because I was angry. Because I knew if I didn't, they'd do it to someone else. And because a home, no matter how small or remote, deserves to be protected. I paused, let that hang in the air. The good news is we fought back. We didn't just win a court case, we set a precedent. HOA power doesn't override property law. No amount of fake inspections or shady maps can erase your rights if you're willing to dig in. Applause broke out, not thunderous, but genuine, the kind that carries weight. Later, someone handed me a plaque. In recognition of Landon Bray, defender of Clear Rock Ridge. I didn't know what to do with it at first, but when I got back home, I nailed it to the inside wall of the cabin, next to the solar controller. Outside, a new sign hung by the gate. Welcome to the last free ridge. I still rent it out, but now, when people visit, they know exactly where they're standing. On ground that stayed free because someone refused to sell it or surrender it or let a Karen bulldoze it into dust.